Okay, everybody. Well, if we remember from the object pronouns part 1 video that we talked about last week, we learned several things. The first thing, of course, we learned is we have to know what our direct object pronouns are, and we have to know what our indirect object pronouns are, and we have to know what our reflexive object pronouns are. And it's probably good to know our subject pronouns as well. However, we know the subject pronouns are vastly different from direct object, indirect object, and reflexive. So I sort of count them as a separate group. We also learned that the basic thing to study with the direct objects, indirect objects, and reflexives are the third persons, because may, te, and nos are the same for all three. And then we also learned, how do I determine what is a direct object and what is an indirect object? And the tip that I gave us is to simply ask the question, what or whom, after the verb. Whatever answers that question is the direct object. And in the case of the sentence, I buy frogs for my mother, we say, I buy what? The answer is frogs, therefore frogs is our direct object. We also ask after the direct object, for or to whom? And the answer to that question is, of course, for my mother, so we know that mother is the indirect object. Therefore, if I need to substitute a pronoun, I'll use a direct object pronoun for frogs and an indirect object pronoun for my mother. And we finished it off by trying it out with a couple of sentences. So let's go ahead and do that here, just as a review. I buy frogs for my mother. Well, we know that whole sentence is simply compro las ranas para mi mamá, or mi madre. We know that ranas is the direct object, and we know that para mi mamá is the indirect object. Therefore, now that I have sentences, I now can rewrite them using direct and indirect object pronouns. The first sentence, I buy them for my mother. We know that then we're going to take ranas, and we are going to substitute the direct object pronoun them. We choose, of course, the direct object pronoun las because it's feminine and plural, and we also learned that they go before the verb, so las compro para mi madre. Okay? The second kind of sentence that we looked at last week was simply rewriting it like the one at the bottom, I buy frogs for her. In this particular case, now what we've done is we've taken the indirect object and we've substituted an indirect object pronoun. So the indirect object pronoun for her is le. We know that all pronouns go before the verb, and so it's just le compro las ranas. So that's what we looked at last week. Now, today, part 2 is the new stuff. So presuming we understand this information from last week, let's now move on to the final bit of information that we need to know for object pronouns. It's conveniently entitled double object pronouns. You will now notice that I have both a direct object pronoun and an indirect object pronoun. Two things we need to know. One, we know that that the pronouns always go before the verb. Which we should know already. But second, we need to know the order. And the order, when we have double object pronouns, always goes indirect, then direct. So the indirect object pronoun will always go first. In this case then, as we look at it, the indirect object pronoun for her is le, the direct object pronoun for frogs is las, so we write indirect first, le, las, compro. I buy them for her. There is one final bit of information we need to know with double object pronouns, and that is we will never have two L's. When that happens, something funky happens, and you don't need to know why. All you need to know is if we have two L's, when we have indirect, the indirect object pronoun ceases to be and simply becomes the word say. So that the correct version of this sentence is se las compro. I buy them for her. And the reason why say is there is because, according to me, Mr. Allegro, we can never have double L's. No lay low, no lay las, no lay los, no lay la. Never, 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 ever. If we have that, the indirect object pronoun will always become say. Please notice, we buy them for her. Well, we write it that way. Le, las. We change compramos because our subject is different. But le, las, we have two L's. Again, that will never work. Therefore, this le goes away and it becomes se. Se las compramos. Okay? Always, always. So we will never have two L's. Example, lay low, lay la, lay los, or lay las. That will never work. This lay will always get scratched out and instead become say. One last one to look at. What if we changed it up, however, and said, you know, she buys them for us, assuming we're still talking about frogs, okay? Well, in this case, now we have something a little bit different. The direct object is still going to be las, because we're talking about las ranas. The indirect object pronoun is going to be nos, so we simply write it nos las compra. However, we don't need to change anything here because we do not have the double L. So nos las works. Okay? I only change it if I have double L's. That's when this would change to say. In this example, it doesn't, and we are okay. Therefore, that's all there is to know about object pronouns. And we will continue to work with these both individually, or as in individual assignments, as well as in, of course, incorporating them into our stories. But to review the new info, double object pronouns, we know that they always go before the verb. We know that the order will always be indirect object pronoun goes before direct. And we know that we will never have two L's, a lay, lo, lay, la, lay, los, lay, las. If we do, the lay goes away and becomes instead say. Good luck, and see me if you have any questions.